Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Today we're only going for the hardcore. We're not going for quantity, we're going for quality.
You're broadcasting to the world.
The whole world is watching. So we're reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 11, entitled The Perfect Society, 4 Social Classes. And we're doing what? Text 3?
That we had.
You did that one?
Yeah.
Third one?
No.
No. That usually comes after 30.
Yeah, but we did 31.
Also?
I think it is 32.
32.
Which also comes after 30.
It does, yes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Svabhavakritaya.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Sanirnirgunatam Iya.
Shanayyagunatam iya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Sanirnirgunatam Iya.
Shanayyagunatam iya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Sanirnirgunatam Iya.
Shanayyagunatam iya. Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Shanayyagunatam iya.
Sanirnirgunatam Iya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Hitva Svabhavajam Karma.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Shanai Nirgunatam Iyat.
Sanirnirgunatam Iya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vritya Svabhavakritaya.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Vartamana Svakarmakrit.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Hitra Svabhavajam Karma.
Shanayyagunatam iya.
Shanayyagunatam Iya. Vritya,
Vritya
with the profession.
with the profession.
Svabhavakriya,
Svabhavakritaya.
performed according to one's modes of material nature.
Performed according to one's modes of material nature.
Vartamanaha,
Vartamana
existing.
existing.
Svakarmakrit,
Svakarmakrit.
executing his own work.
Executing his own work.
Hitva,
Hitva
giving up.
giving up.
Svabhavajam,
Svabhavajam,
born.
born
Born from one's own modes of nature.
from one's own modes of nature,
Karma,
karma,
activities.
activities,
Shanai,
Shanai,
gradually.
gradually,
Nirgunatam,
Nirgunatam,
transcendental position.
transcendental position,
Iyad,
Iyad,
may attain.
may attain.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, His Dr. Danta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
If one acts in his profession according to his position in the modes of nature and gradually gives up these activities, he attains the Nishkama stage. Purport. If one gradually gives up his hereditary customs and duties and tries to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his natural position, he is gradually able to become free from these activities. And he attains the stage of Nishkama, freedom from material desires. Sri Chaitanya Vistam Sthapitam Bhutri Swayam Vanchakalpa Vishya Vasudev Aditana Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shri Vasa Gaura Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, so very short and to the point. If one acts in his profession according to his position in the modes of nature and gradually gives up these activities, he attains the Nishkama stage. So Nishkama, of course, meaning without desires, but Niskama not meaning without activity, right? That's sometimes the misconception is that no, we give up all material activities and then you're finally, in the end, you're liberated and you're kind of just floating around there, being in oneness with everything and everything is one, right? That's a philosophy that is being propagated in some circles. But that's not what it means, because there is still variety within this oneness. Or you could say it in another way. If you're experiencing oneness, what is this experiencing part? If everything is the same, then where is the experience? How you have to experience something. Like if I am seeing something, it doesn't mean I'm one with the thing I'm seeing. There is a similarity, there is a oneness because there's a relationship, but I have to be seeing something. So in the same way, Niskama, without desires, doesn't mean that all desires disappear. It just means that the desires are dovetailed so that they are in line with the Supreme. That means we don't have any separate desires. There's no desires for something that's mine. We have, we all know how it goes, that, so much for Krishna, then a little bit for myself. And what is that little bit? That little bit is actually illusion, because we're seeing it as if it's something separate from the whole, as if it's not actually part of the world, as it's just mine. And that's what gets us into trouble. Those who are very much in that type of consciousness are in a lot of trouble. Those who are not so much in that type of consciousness are in less trouble. So that's what it means that, in the purport here it says, if one gradually gives up his hereditary customs and duties. Here in this case, hereditary customs and duties are these things that we just do because that's just how it ended up. Maybe because of our family, maybe because we're from Denmark, so we have a certain culture here or way of doing things. Maybe because we just like it, we just got used to doing things in a certain way. Gradually giving this mentality up. And here's the fun part, it doesn't necessarily mean that the activity changes at all. It may be that just the mentality of the activity changes. That you may even be engaged in the same type of work after you give up this mentality, but because the mentality is different, then actually we would say the work is also different. It's done in a mode of service rather than in a mode of I want to be a great person, or I want some kind of social position, I want a lot of money, or I want beautiful women, or whatever it is, these desires that we're talking about here, whatever they may be, that those desires are giving up. It's not seen as an end in itself. Rather, the end is seen as the pleasure of Krishna, meaning the pleasure of everyone and everything, that all living entities and God should benefit from our activities. So that's what we're dealing here gradually. This chapter is called The Perfect Society for Social Classes. And of course, in this part of the world, this is something that kind of sometimes sparks a reaction, because we like a classless society. We like social mobility. You know, you're born into a working class family and then you become the great intellectual or the great businessman or something like that. Or you're born royal and you just want to cook food or something like that. This is seen as something very great, that it means that no, we can do whatever we want. And in a sense it's great, in that it actually is not against the injunctions of these scriptures, that if you have that mentality, then you should do whatever according to your mentality. It shouldn't be that just because you're born by it, like there's this guy Mick Shack, you know him? Mick Shack? He had a television program. Before that he had a radio program. I don't know what he's doing today. I'm a monk, I don't follow these things anymore. But there's this Schackenborg where Prince Joachim is living. That's his Schack. That's the last name. So he's like a count or something. He's like some kind of royal. But he just couldn't fit into this royal mood. So he just became a cook. He just liked to cook. And then finally he started making radio programs, and it's very simple, basic cooking, just hanging out with some jazz musicians and that. He has that mentality. So we don't want to force him to be in a royal kind of setting with the dress and all the formalities if he just doesn't fit in there. You know. However, the problem is if we start to glorify these jobs, if we say social mobility is objectively, by definition, good, so that means if you're socially mobile, that means you're better than if you're not. Because who says there's anything wrong with being born by a carpenter and then becoming a carpenter yourself? It's not necessarily, maybe you like it, and you have the perfect teacher in your father, you can see this whole mentality and everything. Usually that's actually easier. So the whole social mobility thing is an exception. It's a great exception if it's kind of called for, if it fits, if you have that tendency to be super intellectual, even though your parents are just, quiet and, normal workers. That's great, but if you don't, then it's a problem. And that's why we see now in the universities in Denmark, we have a lot of people who don't fit in there. Because they're there because there was some kind of expectation from society, from family, whatever. Maybe the parents were like, I never got an education, so you have to do. But maybe they don't really want to, actually. Maybe they think they want to because everybody's been telling them that you'll be happy and you'll get a good job, you'll make some more money, and money makes you happy, we all know that. And then suddenly they find themselves at the university and they're not actually intellectuals. Like the university used to be a place for very few people that were very independent thinkers and wanted to research and do these kind of works. Now it's just an extension of public school. That where when the professor says, no, could you please read this chapter for next week? And they're going, oh, do we have to? Why are they there? They're there because they want a nice job, a family, and they want to feel safe. They're not there because they're intellectuals. And you see it in the statistics that half of the students at Copenhagen University, they feel stressed out in their everyday life because it's always trying to achieve something that doesn't come natural to them. Around exam time, it skyrockets to like 90% are stressed out. So that's the problem when you have an objective that social mobility is objectively good. Because if you look at the society, how many intellectuals do you need? If you look at society, what needs to be done for Denmark to run as a project? We don't need a lot of people analyzing Dostoevsky. I mean, it's nice once in a while, but it's not really that necessary for the country as a project to run. We need someone to clean the streets, we need someone to be in a shop, we need some people to build some houses, we need some... That's a lot of practical stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with intellectualism. But because we've gotten this idea in our head that intellectualism is better, then everybody is gravitating towards that. So the four social classes that they're talking about here is basically you have your worker mentality, you have your business mentality, you have your management or administration mentality, and you have your intellectual mentality. These are just four different types of mentalities that you can have. So the problem is if you see the body and the living entity as one, there's no difference, then there will be a difference in value. Then the intellectual will be worth more than the worker. You're just a worker. What are you doing? Nothing special. The intellectual is coming up with all these fancy ideas and everyone is impressed. So naturally there will be a problem there. But if you see the soul or the living entity or the consciousness as distinct from the body, as actually two different entities, then suddenly where's the problem? The body's just the body. That's not a big deal. It's going to be, we walk around in it for a few years and then we leave it by the roadside. But the soul has the value. Then you can have equality. The whole thing about gender equality and freedom of speech and all these things makes no sense unless you distinguish between the soul and the body. Unless you distinguish between the consciousness and the lump of matter that is surrounding it. Because we are not equal. Some are more intelligent than others. Some run faster, work harder. Some are better at dealing with money. It's something I never really learned, this thing with money. I'm just not good at it. So how are we equal? If it's just the sum total of our activities pertaining to the body that is our identity, how can there be equality? There cannot be any equality. Some are just better than others. It's a fact, So we have to distinguish between the living entity and the body that it kind of inhabits, right? Because then there's equality, because the souls are equal. But because they're in different types of bodies, there are different types of duties. That's why we have four social classes, because then we can accommodate everyone. Whatever you want to do, we can deal with that. I happen to have a conditioning where I don't need this home thing. I'm okay with just traveling around and having everything in my suitcase. So that means I can do that. So that means my duties are different than my brother's, who just had a daughter, he's married, has a wife, and he works as a programmer, and that's really great, because I'm not making money. So I'm depending on others who make money to give me some donations, otherwise it's just not going to work. So that's what a society is, right? The perfect society is that we have different duties according to our strengths and weaknesses, and then we cooperate to make everything run. And that works if we see the soul as distinct from the body. Because then the street sweeper and the politician, they have equal worth as humans. Their work doesn't have equal worth because the decisions he made affect so many more people than a street sweeper. So if you have a bad politician, it's worse than if you have a bad street sweeper, right? Because he can create much more problems. So that's why if we have a good politician, we acknowledge that, because a lot of people are depending on him. But on a human level, it has nothing to do with that. So that's what we're trying to do with Krishna consciousness, is make that distinction. Because then everybody should, on a theoretical level, everybody should be able to be fulfilled and happy and content with what they're doing, and not be pushed into these boxes where we don't actually belong, just because society has, one time it's you have to be nano biology or something. It's just a hype thing to be. And then 10 years later, architect is just a hip and happening thing. And everybody's gravitating towards this direction and then that direction. And then, I was told that there was this young lady, she's on the psychology, studying psychology at the university. And it's like you have to have like a huge average of the grades to get in. Now the study itself is not actually that complicated. It's not like, but it's just because everybody wants it right now. So then they just increase the grade to be admitted, and then so many can't get in because of that. And then they find a certain amount of students who they get in. And then I'm affiliated with the modern India studies, and nobody wants to do that. So then everybody can get in. It doesn't have anything to do with what society actually needs. It doesn't have anything to do with what are our strengths and weaknesses. It's just business. Everything has become business. Even well, maybe not so much our healthcare, but at least the American healthcare system, it's just business. So you buy the patent for some kind of drug that everybody needs, or some need, and then you just yank up the price because you can. Because what are they going to do? Die? No, they're going to pay whatever they need to pay to get the medicine. So you become a millionaire. And it's happening to a certain extent in Denmark also, that now there is a difference between private sector and public sector of healthcare. So those who have money, they can go to the private healthcare system and skip the lines and get the better treatment. So this is a problem. If everything becomes business, it doesn't actually work for the benefit of the people. Business is just business. It works for the benefit of the few, right? So that's why we have these different classes, and why we have different duties pertaining to the different classes. So the high class of the intellectuals are expected to be detached, because if they have stock in healthcare, or they have stock in some other area, then whatever they're advising will not be objective. It will be based on what they can gain, and which we also see in universities, that if there's a certain outcome of some kind of experiment that will be beneficial for getting your paper published in Nature or the Lancet or something, there is a tendency that you're going to twist the examination. I read an article not so long ago that some people had tried to take out of Nature, this very respected scientific journal, take articles published in Nature and try to recreate those results. And they were successful in 30% of the time. So that means 70% of the time they couldn't recreate those results that they were publishing in the